session so that we have the session recorded for those who are not able to make the meeting today. And as I said, I sent an email out, and I'll be recording it, as well as we're going to be offering another set of office hours so that you can ask questions after today's meeting next week if you're available. And then we'll do some office hours when we return from break as we get into the height of recovery services. So Christina is going to put up one of the documents that once we get to that document and we begin talking about it, she'll project that document for you. It's up right now. I'm going to put my camera on for a second. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debbie Lorenzo again. I'm the coordinator from the Office of Special Ed Procedural Support. Thank you guys so much for coming and being here today. Sorry for the confusion with the email not being sent out on this afternoon's meeting. But again, we're going to record it so you can share it if your admin wasn't able to come, or if that you have others that you could use it with. So I have team members from the Office of Special Ed Instruction. This was a collaborative effort in putting together these documents that you have. You have the guidance document on recovery services, which was front facing to the public web, which the parents have a copy of. And then you also have a recording that supports the guidance document. And then this document that we have up is a supplemental document that was put together in collaboration with the Office of Special Ed Instruction and procedural support. So we had a lot of folks, had a lot of information, a lot of hands-on with this information. I wanted to give a special thanks to Judy. Judy Dupre, the coordinator from Related Services, really got us going with this supplemental document and putting it together. So I'd like to give her a lot of thanks and support for that. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to get started with, I just want to go over a little bit about the actual guidance document, the original document that there was a recording that we did, if you remember, when we had the elementary lead teacher meeting. You were not, because our meeting was so late, we recorded some information about recovery services. So this was like a part 2 from that recording, the one that you have attached it, that you received in the email with the guidance document and the supplemental document. So I'm not going to go over that in great detail. What I'm going to do is, Christina is showing you where you can find the documents. So you have the guidance document where it says new, the supplemental document, and the recording have not been shared with families. Those are only for school staff only. But the guidance document you can find on the FCPS web, and that is for families. Okay. So in regards to the guidance document, the big one that you received, the first one with the recording, that really listed the purposes of recovery services. We've been talking a lot in detail about that during our in the recording, as well as in the lead teacher meeting. We talked about reasons why you would provide recovery, the data that you would use, how to document the recovery services is in this document on the IEP and on the services page. There's also information on appendices about compensatory services and the differences between the data, as Christine is showing you, what data you need to collect, some questions that were asked. Again, services and the plop, what goes on the services and the plop, as well as some supplemental documents in the appendices, which were scenarios about when to hold IEPs, social emotional learning. There is the comparison between recovery and compensatory. Remember, one of the things we talked about when we've met before in lead teacher and in the recording, recovery services do not necessarily, not every student will require recovery services. So this is why you're going to be taking a look at the data, you're going to be analyzing the data, and we'll use that supplemental document to go through that when you're trying to determine which students should receive recovery services and which students would not. Then there is a flow chart with, again, some scenarios about IEPs, what kind of IEP, when to hold the IEP, And then there is a PWN document for if you should decide not to, you or refuse to hold an IEP at this time. This is a document that you would be using, and you work with your PSL. In most cases, we probably will be holding any IEPs where a parent would request the IEP meeting, and we may not have the information to move forward with the recovery conversation, but at least we open up the conversation. So this would probably be done rarely. We'll rarely use it, but just in case we need it. So I'm going to move on to the supplemental document. I'm not going to go through the whole document line by line and word by word because I want to give you some time to ask questions as a group. We may have some of the answers. We may not have some of the answers, but we'll do the best we can today with answering as best as we can. Like I said, I'm going to have additional office hours next Monday if questions should come up. And then when we return from break, we'll have another set of office hours that we'll be able to answer some questions for you. So let's take a look at this, the supplemental document. If you have it in front of you, we're going to start with page 1. And what we're looking at in this first page, you'll see that there's 2 graphs in this first page. The first graph is asking you about the data. It's talking about the data points. So there are 3 different data points you're looking at. You're going to be looking at a data point pre-COVID, asking yourself about the student's baseline data prior to pre-COVID. What was the child using that? What was the child using that data on target? Was there mastery of that skill? You're going to be looking at all of that. What was some progress being made on that particular in that particular skill set or goal that you were working on? Or was there limited to no progress being made towards mastery? So that's really important to know about the pre-COVID data that you're looking at. Then the second data point takes you to when the school closure. You're going to look at the appropriate school closure data from last spring. You're going to look at, was baseline being maintained? Was there some loss of skill noted? Some considerable loss or regression of skills? So you'll be taking a look at that information. And then in the third data set, you'll look at your current data. How is the child doing since the last couple of weeks from the return to school? Are they at or above the baseline data that they currently had? Are they holding steady? Or is there continued loss? So based on that information, you are now going to look at how is that data trending? And that's what the second chart that Judy put together for us, when you scroll down that page, looks at that trending data. And when you take a look at that data, if the data is trending towards the need for recovery services, then you need to begin to think about what those recovery services may look like. And then you will think about the scope of the services. What area of skill will need to be addressed, then projected dates. When will we start them and end them? How long will we deliver the services? You'll look at the frequency and ask how frequent, and then look at location. Will it be done in person or virtually, individually, and in group? And we'll go into some more information about that as we go on in the presentation. Now, okay, Christina, can you scroll to page 2? So page 2 is a sample template that several of our OSEI and OSIP staff got together and created you a sample template that you can use when you're trying to determine if there is a need for recovery services. It's not the only thing you can use, but it's something we wanted to put together based on the questions we were receiving and the asks that we were receiving from schools in order to support the teachers in collecting and putting this data together. So if you look at this form, it takes you through third quarter progress data, fourth quarter attendance and participation. It takes you through ESY if the student had ESY. It takes you through, and we'll talk about rate of acquisition in a few minutes. Takes you through the current data, the return to school data, and then at the end you're going to culminate all this information and answer the last question: does the student require additional considerations? That could be recovery, an IEP for recovery, or it can be an IEP to change something else. And we put in examples in here so that it gives you an idea of how to do this and how to put it together. So that is a sample document that we put in there. And then what we decided to do was to actually put some examples together for you. But before we do that, we're asking for school teams to consider rate of acquisition. When we put that in there, we, as we talked to some folks, we realized that we needed to kind of define what rate of acquisition was in case it was a term that your teachers weren't familiar with. So rate of acquisition is the rate of which a student makes progress towards a goal when participating in instruction. Rate of acquisition analysis provides valuable information about the student's potential future performance and comparison with the peers when appropriately used. So that is your rate of acquisition. And the way that you find the rate of acquisition, and we put down, thank you to Jillian and Mochi and Dawn Azanar, who put together this chart and this graph and gave you an example of how and what culminates rate of acquisition. So you're looking at that ending performance, and then the current skill. So when you look at the rate in the chart, I think it's pretty easy for the teachers to take a look at how they would look and try to find that information. So they're looking at ending performance, and then they're looking at the beginning performance with no breaks. So we have to remember we're going to eliminate breaks. And then they're going to look at the number of weeks. And if you look at the box, it actually will take you through ending performance minus beginning performance divided by the number of weeks will give you your rate of acquisition. In order to make it easier for the teachers as well, they also added the school calendar links. So they don't have to go back and try to determine when was this break, when was what day, how many days were off this day, when did this start. It's all in here for them, so they can use this this page to, if they're not sure how to determine what rate of acquisition is. And then we also included some data sheets that Tina and in ABA Cat B are using, the latency, frequency, and duration data sheets, so they don't actually have to go searching for them. They're right there for them to use. So I'm going to take a break here. Are there any questions about what I just talked about, the data, the beginning charts, trying to figure out the data itself, the trending, and then the template so far? I'll take some questions I'll take a few questions. Lauren? I think I saw somebody's hand go up, or no? Okay. If we don't have any questions, I can keep going, and then we could take questions after. Oh, Emily, go ahead. Emily, do you have your mic on? We can't hear you. Don't seem to be able to hear Emily. Do you want to put your question, Emily, in the chat, and then we can I can look at the question afterwards, or? Does anybody else have a question before we move on, and then we can get back to questions afterwards? Okay, so I will move through the next couple of pages. So when you look at page, Denise?
Debbie, I think you have it scheduled set up so that people can't access their mic or write in the chat.
Oh, it should be like that. I don't know why it would be like that. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, hold on one second. Let me fix that. Okay. Is it working now? Let's see now. Is it good? It's working now? Sorry about that. I didn't realize that was on. Okay, so let's get some questions. I think, Emily, we should be able to hear you now. Thank you.
Still no microphone though, Debbie.
There's no microphone. I'm not sure why the microphone is not on. Does anybody know how to problem?
So I know how to do it, but the session just wasn't set up that way, so I can't even turn it on.
Debbie, it's Dawn. Did you set this up through the BBCU scheduler, or is this your session? I can't remember when I logged in.
It's my scheduler. I set it up through. I never did anything different. That's why I'm just so surprised it's doing this.
Sometimes it's when it's a repeated session or it's used again, it will default to that. I've had it do that to me too. What we can do so folks can share their mic is to elevate them to presenter.
Okay, I can do that. If we can do that, that will.
Hand.
Debbie,
Okay,
I can do
perfect.
that for you. Debbie, I can do that for you while you moderate. So just when people raise their hand, I'll elevate them.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for that. I've never had that happen before. That is so weird that that happened. Okay, so why don't I go through finish the document while we're doing that, and then we'll take questions. Okay, so from pages 4 through 13, there are samples. There is a behavior sample. So if you look at the behavior sample and this one, there's the IEP goal skill is outlined. So this is a young man by the name of Abel, and it's talking about his participation in language, waiting his turn, listening to others. Then they put in the data from third quarter. Overall, during the third quarter, Abel was able to participate in classroom discussions by using language, waiting his turn, listening to others, and then so on. Then it goes into fourth quarter. Concern attended at 637, 16% of sessions. Then it says Abel had limited computer and internet access, so it goes through that. It talks about his rate of acquisition. Prior to the start third quarter, he was achieving accuracy of 40%. Then it talks about his ESY. He did not have ESY. And then it looks at the goal itself for the virtual environment and whether or not it had to be revised. And then there were data collection for 1 to 3 weeks was in there. And then you see how they have regression data. For him, he had limited incidents of inappropriate language during the chats. For the 3 weeks of school, for the first opportunity, there was 1 incident of cursing. And so they go into details of that magnitude, and then they go into recoupment data for the 7 to 9 weeks. And then they move into the rate of acquisition. So they take all the data, and then they say at the beginning of the first quarter, Abel was achieving an accuracy of 0% of his classroom participation goal is now at a percentage of 25%. The number of instructional weeks between the beginning data point and the ending data point equals 7 weeks. So his current rate of acquisition is appropriately similar to his pre-COVID. So in this case, they said no. They said no to any additional considerations because they said he is currently demonstrating the ability to appropriately participate in class at a rate that is on target for mastering of this goal within the annual review of the IEP. So this is just one example. The next elementary example, I'm not going to go through all of them, but when you look at the next one, which is the Cat A elementary example, it takes you through a student who does require recovery services based on the information. So, and as you go through the pages, you will see there are different examples. There are some secondary examples. There is a preschool example, and there is also an EAC example that Tina had added for enhanced audit, and there is Cat B examples. So you just wanted to give you examples. Now these are just, this is only one student, so these are only samples. It may look very different for any of the students that you had, but we thought it would be helpful if we took you through how to use the document. And then the next section after page 13 or 14 are examples of how to take the information. Oh, so let me just stop at this one really quick. If you have a student where attendance and participation were something that you really wanted to do some more diving into, some deep dive into that data because for any reason the student didn't attend or there were some participation issues or other circumstances that you think you needed to do more with attendance and participation, we gave you a form that you can use. You don't have to use it. It was just something extra that we put in there because we do know the importance of participation and attendance as part of when you're looking at recovery services and you're looking at rate of acquisition. Okay, so then pages 15 through 18 go through, it has the current goal and then it has the recovery plan. Some of them are actually mirror the samples you have above, but some of them are just additional ones. And it gives you some ideas about how you would record the recovery services on the plot page. And if you look at the first one, it talks about the young person's name is Jacob. So Jacob has an elementary goal. They would list the objectives, and then the recovery plan is that he was able to match 3 common objects. It goes into the 4 numbers, 1 word. And then it talks about the current data and indicates that while he was made some progress and now matches 4 common objects, he's still currently only matching 4 numbers and 1 word, maintaining a score of 3. So at this, the team agrees that given the rate of progress prior to school closure in March, Jacob likely would have progressed further on this goal over the course of 6 weeks, beginning the week of 1/4/21 and ending 2/12/21. The special education team will provide 1 30-minute session per week to support progress towards the goal. The school team and parents will work together to schedule after-school times to provide the services. So you can see that in this case, depending on when you hold the IEP meeting, you can choose to start the recovery services right out, close or soon after you hold your meeting, or you can set those services for several weeks after the meeting. It's going to depend on the individual students, and it's going to depend on individual cases. If you looked at the document that the state of Virginia had sent us on the recovery for COVID, they did not specify when these services have to be completed by. So we've gotten a lot of questions saying, well, do they have to be completed by a certain month, like March? Can they be, can we do it in the summer? Well, could it go on to next year? It could. They didn't give us a finite time or date when they need to be done or put in place. They basically just said to us, you should be looking at least 9 weeks of data before you determine whether or not a student requires recovery services. So that's about the only kind of time frame they put on us. But what we want to make sure is that you're providing recovery services for students when you believe it would be beneficial for them. And I saw a question about virtual or in person. Yes, they can be delivered virtually. And for those students that are in person, they can be delivered in person. I'll go through some of those questions as we're wrapping up this part. There is, I'm going to have Ellen Glazer talk a little bit about what we've set up in case you're not able to put together, or you don't have somebody in your building who's able to provide the services. I'll have Ellen talk about that in a few minutes. But there are several examples. There's examples of related services, what it could look like for related services. Yes, Dawn?
I'm going to jump in and help Ellen out on that.
Sure.
We've had a lot of
Sure.
developments and work on this effort this morning.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Once I'm done with this, we'll do that next, and then we'll take some questions. Okay, so as we said, recovery services are not for every student. You may find that every student doesn't require recovery services, but if they do, we put together this supplemental document to hopefully help with the data collection, what it's going to look like on in the services page and in the plop. There's OTPT examples on there, and I believe Christina, let's see, speech and language. And that is it for the supplemental document. So if you have any questions about the supplemental document, we can talk about that in a second. I want to give Dawn and Ellen the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've set up in lieu of in trying to support school teens with recovery services. We've gotten a lot of questions about if we do recovery services after school, before school, on the weekends, in the summer, will there be funds to pay teachers? Where will the funds come from? And they'll be coming from DSS, but I'll have Dawn talk a little bit about that now.
So thanks, Debbie, and Ellen will jump in here too. I just want to say that I know it's taking us a while to figure all this out. We just had a lengthy meeting this morning with folks in finance about how to do this documentation. We do have CARES money that will cover all recovery services. And so whether you have someone in your building to do the recovery services or not, they're still going to need to follow a process, because we have to document their efforts because they're being paid through a grant. And so we should, by the end of the week, probably more like in a day or two, have posted on the DPE intranet page, which is where just about all of these other documents are, the process for teachers to be paid. I'm going to show you the current working document just so you have an understanding of the complexity of it. I'll admit, I'm a little frustrated that it's so complex, but I think we've finally worked out all the kinks and our questions about it. So give me just a second, I'll share it. It should be coming up. There's a little bit of a delay. Here we go. So you can see this is still our working document. So, and this can go back in time as well. If you had teachers who were doing evaluations outside of contract hours, they can also submit for pay that way. I know we have a couple of schools who are waiting for these directions for evaluations, and this is educational evaluations. And then I know at least one school is waiting for these directions for instruction for recovery services. So these follow the temporary hourly assignment scale. We are going to need whoever is going to be doing this to complete a Google form, and we're going to link to that form in here, and email their resume to Ellen Glazer. And then this is mostly so that we can keep track of everyone, because you'll see in just a moment it's a little bit complex. Then we'll need an email to Julie Moore, who's the admin assistant in our office, with their name, with the employee name and the name of the student to whom you're providing services. We do have to report that because it is grant funded. Julie will complete an HR 11. She'll let the teacher know when they can enter their time in My Time. We have directions available for time entry into My Time. And if you all have ever worked in summer clinic, you're probably familiar with entering hourly time in My Time. It's a little bit different when you're on contract than it is in the summertime when you're not on contract. There's some sub-object codes and position codes that will be needed for entry into My Time. And then one of the big steps that we've been working out is this, what's called the SSSE 354, or the PAR. It is the document that anybody who provides recovery services will need to fill out. And they're not just filling out their work, they're also filling out, they're not just filling out their hourly work, they're also filling out their regular time. And this, I think, is the thing that may be most confusing to staff. And I have one that's started. If you'll give me just a sec, I'll share that with you, because I think it helped me to fill out a dummy one to understand what this looks like. Give me just a second.